you guys, I'm Kim. Welcome back to my channel. This week I've been making glitter houses. Actually, I've been trying to reproduce a glitter house that's in my collection. It's this cute little guy here. You'll notice it's very simple, but if you've never made one of these houses before, this is a fabulous place to start. And because they're so simple, I really like to use these in my decor because this can travel from season to season. It could be Christmas. I'm using it right now for Valentine's. It could also be part of some 4th of July decorations. The pattern for this house, as well as the two other kind of elevations, you can find that in the description box below, along with the list of the supplies you'll need. So how about we jump into the tutorial, then I'll meet you back here and I'll show you some of the other glitter houses I made using this pattern. Start off by printing out the pattern onto regular old typing paper. You'll notice there are 3 different styles of houses and the styles are in 2 different sizes. The last page in the document is a little sheet of graphics that came off of vintage Valentines. You can print them out in cardstock like I did here. I've already cut some of them out. You can use these to decorate your finished house with if you want. When you figured out which house you want to make, just cut out the pattern pieces. You'll need one of the house patterns, you'll need a base, and then you'll need the roof that corresponds to the house design you've chosen. You will need to cut the openings for the windows and the doors. I sometimes use a hole punch to help me get started. That at least gives me a little spot where I can get my tiny scissors in to finish cutting out those faces. Once all the pieces are cut out, you can trace your design onto the cardboard. I use old cereal boxes, but you could use any cardboard that is a similar thickness. You'll also need to transfer the dotted lines from the pattern onto the cardboard. These indicate where you're going to need to fold the house. I use a grid ruler to help me get those dotted lines at a 90-degree angle to the base of my house. When everything's marked, you can start cutting your house out. I use some heavy-duty Fiskars scissors that are designed to cut this sort of cardboard. I use them to cut as much as I can. I will go back with an exacto knife or this little Olfa box cutter that I really like to use to get those windows and the door. But these scissors are my favorite. Use whatever tool works best for you. Just watch your fingers. And don't worry if your doors and window don't line up perfectly straight. Mine hardly ever do, and I think a little bit of wonkiness just adds to the charm of these little houses. The only thing you need to do before you're ready to fold and glue together the house is to score along those dotted lines, and I forgot to get that on film. So I use a knitting needle. You can see that on the right hand side of the screen. I use a knitting needle and a straight edge just to score along the line. But you could use any number of household tools like a butter knife to make that scored line. Okay, so now we just fold and glue. Really, there's only one tab that we're going to glue right now. That's going to be the tab on the house. I do try to make sure that the base of the house is going to set flat by making sure that the base lines up with each other when I make the folds. Then I just put some Elmer's glue on the tab and use a paper clip to hold it in place. While that dries, let's work on the roof. The original house was also an ornament, so I'm going to try to make mine the same way. First, I need to punch a hole in the center of the roof, just along that fold line. I'm going to mark the place where I want to make the hole, and then I'm going to use my box cutter to help me get that hole started, just to kind of break the surface of the cardboard. Then I move to a pretty heavy-duty embroidery needle to punch the actual hole. And now if the house is dry, we'll go ahead and paint it before we continue on with the ornament hanger. The first thing I do, and this is totally optional, is I put a layer of gesso over the house, the roof, the base. I feel like the gesso gives me a good surface for painting on. It also helps cover up some of the printing that's on the cereal box I'm using. Another thing I use the gesso for is to add texture. I just put a little hobby sand in a container, add some gesso. I'm never real precise with the amounts. Anyway, stir it up, and then I will paint this kind of pebbly mixture onto the base, just the top of the base, so that it looks kind of like grass in the yard, and then I'll put it on the roof. You could also do the house if you wanted. It's just whatever you like. Or you could leave this step out if you want a smooth surface everywhere. Once the gesso's dry, you can paint the house however you like. I use regular old hobby acrylic paints for this, and even with the gesso, it usually takes 2 or 3 coats to get a nice even finish. When painting around the windows, one thing you might want to do is have a Q-tip or a paper towel handy to remove any extra drips or globs of paint that can form around the window openings. That will make for a flatter surface when you go to glue the window pane in later. Well, actually, I guess it's later because my house is now painted and dry and I'm ready to do the window. To do the window, I'm going to take a piece of colored cellophane, or it could be clear cellophane, and I'm going to use the original house pattern and a Sharpie type marker to trace around the front of the house onto the cellophane. Then I'm going to cut this out so that I can glue it onto the inside of the house front. This can be a little tricky. What I do is put a few drops of Elmer's glue on the inside of the house. I use a Q-tip to wipe it around so that I have a thin layer everywhere. And then I let it rest a little bit so that it's not quite so wet as it is just a little bit tacky. And then I carefully place the cellophane over the glued area. I often get a few smudges of glue on the window pane, and when that happens, I just take a Q-tip and try to get the glue off as best as I can. And then I'll just set the house aside for now. While the window's drying, I need to put that ornament hanger in place, definitely before the roof goes on the house. To do this, I'm taking about a 7 or 8 inch piece of this little gold cord. I'm going to thread that embroidery needle with it, and then I'm going to string it through the roof from the underside of the roof up to the top, and then I'll come back in through the top of the roof to make a little loop. To keep that loop from slipping out on me, I put a Q-tip in there to hold it in place. Then I'm just going to knot the 2 loose ends together. I'll take that Q-tip out. I will pull the loop out away from the top of the house so that the knot is next to the roof on the bottom side, and then I'll glue that in place with just a little dot of tacky glue. Now I'm ready to put the roof on the house. If you notice, the roof on the original vintage house is set all the way forward, so it's kind of flush at the back. That's how I'm going to do mine. And to glue it on, I'm going to use tacky glue. I just kind of run a bead of tacky glue around the top of the house. I like the tacky glue for this part because it's nice and thick and it won't drip down the sides of my house like the Elmer's might. And while the glue is sitting right on top of the house, I just put the roof on there, kind of wiggle it around to where it gets to be exactly like I want it placed. And then I just have to hold it for a while until the glue becomes tacky enough to hold itself. While it's drying, I also go around the edges of the glue line with a Q-tip to pick up any drips that kind of squished through that seam. When it's dry enough to hold its own, I'll go ahead and glue the house to the base, just the way I glued the roof on. Just run a line of the tacky glue and then position the house where you want it on the base. I'm trying to make mine just like the vintage one, so it's going to go all the way to the back center of the base. Okay, so once the house is dry, we finally get to glitter, and I'm jumping right into the glitter here. I use a Mod Podge to attach my glitter to the house. I want a light dusting of glitter, not full coverage, so I'm gonna almost dry brush the Mod Podge on in kind of an irregular way, and then I am going to hold my glitter shaker pretty far away from my house and then just lightly cover it. But you can use whatever, kind of thickness of glitter you want. I am, however, using 3 colors of glitter, and because of that, I need to be really careful to make sure that I let the house dry in between each color of glitter. If I were to do the red roof while the white house was still dry and tacky, I'd have little red flakes of glitter all over my white house. So I'm finally on my last round of glitter, just a little green on the base of the house. Then I'm going to set my house down and let it get nice and dry. So now my house is good and dry, and I'm pretty pleased with the results. Here is the original vintage house. This one does look a little bit different, but overall I'm very pleased. And I told you I would show you some of the other houses I've made. I also made the larger version that I put in the pattern. It's the same exact house, just blown up a little bit. By making it bigger, it will allow you a little more space to decorate if you want to decorate your house. I haven't put very much decoration on mine. I tend to use mine as kind of the supporting casts in my display, so I like them simple, but you can make them as elaborate as you want. Here, I just used a little trim to make a wreath. Another thing you can do is add some trim, or this is a pipe cleaner, around the roof line. Another thing you can do is decorate your house with little figures. You might have little miniatures that you'd like to glue on the base. If you don't have those, I did include some little paper figures taken from vintage Valentines that you could cut out and use to decorate up your base if you would like. Well, I think that about wraps up this project. I sure appreciate y'all watching. If you like this sort of content, please consider subscribing to my channel. Leave me a comment in the comment section below. I would really appreciate it. Until next week, you guys, happy crafting, and bye-bye.